Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to RosieCon Book Festival. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Diane Rogers, and I am the school librarian at Ben Davis Ninth Grade Center in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the founding member of the RosieCon Book Festival. I'm very pleased that you've decided to join us today for our festival's 6th author panel for the 2022-2023 school year. RosieCon chooses which books and authors to invite to the festival based upon the titles each year that are on the Elliott Rosewater, Indiana High School book list. All authors and illustrators for the 25 titles are invited to participate. And for various reasons, usually scheduling conflicts, it isn't always possible for all invitees to attend. In case you didn't know, the Rosewater list is a recommended reading list of contemporary young adult titles for Indiana teens. This list is renewed and refreshed every school year with new and exciting books and is sponsored by the Indiana Library Federation. Near the end of each school year, teens from across the state will vote for their favorite book, and the winning title is given the Rosewater Award. Voting is online and is currently open, so go to rosiebookaward.com, that's ROSIE bookaward.com, and vote. Voting is open through the first week of May every school year. Before I give the mic and camera over to the author and our moderator for today, let me take a second to thank our sponsors for this book festival. Money and support has been provided by the Lilly Endowment for the Arts, the Indianapolis Foundation Library Fund, and Wayne Township Schools. Without the support of these organizations, RosieCon Book Festival would not be possible, and we are in our 5th season this year. All right, enough introduction, enough of me talking. Let's get to our authors and our moderators. I want to introduce our moderator for today, who is Emily Fox. Emily is the director of Switzerland County Public Library in Vevey, Indiana. That is very close to the Ohio River, for those of you who don't know Indiana geography very well. Welcome, Emily. It's great to have you here with us today. Please take it away.
Thank you, Diane. I'm really happy to be here today, and I am very pleased to introduce our author today. Catherine McGee is the New York Times bestselling author of the 1000th Floor series. She studied English and French literature at Princeton and has an MBA from Stanford. She's been speculating about American royalty since her undergraduate days when she wrote a thesis on castle envy, the idea that the American psyche is missing out on something because Americans don't have a royal family of their own. After several years in New York and then in California, Catherine now lives with her husband in her hometown of Houston, Texas. So welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. And I'm so grateful that American Royals is on the Rosewater list.
Yes, I told you before we started recording and everything, but I've read the whole series, and it's such a treat of a book. I really enjoy all of them, and I can't wait for the next one.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping things. So for the audience, if you have a question and you are joining on Zoom, if you can hit the Q&A button and type your question in there. If you're watching on YouTube, you can put it in the comments, and Diane's moderating that, and will send us the questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to send those in, and we will put them in as needed. So well, we will go ahead and get started. So I have, questions about the book, questions about your life and your experience as an author. So first off, what got you into writing, and why did you want to become an author?
I'm one of those people who has always wanted to write. As a child, I was checking out the max number of library books, and I at a very early age learned what being an editor was. So someone told me that being an editor was a job where you got paid to read books all day. That's not actually what editors do, but I was for a long time a 5-year-old walking around saying, I'm going to be an editor. And so I actually did work in book publishing for 4 years after college. As I said, I've always been such a voracious reader. And so I worked in editorial in young adult in New York City, working on some fantastic series, including the Pretty Little Liars books. I actually got to help edit the final 6 books of that series, and the very last Gossip Girl. And so I worked on some really fun, iconic, teen franchises that had TV tie-ins, actually, which was a fun treat. And while I was working in editorial, I really got a chance to see how books are made. I think that was particularly helpful to me. It's very daunting as an aspiring writer to look at a finished book and think, I need to produce something like this. Finished books are the result of a year or years of the author's time, in addition to the work of so many people, editors and designers and salespeople. And there's so much that goes into that final package. And so, it was helpful for me to kind of see the process from the inside out and think and realize that I didn't need to write an absolutely perfect, polished, completed book as it would go on sale in a bookstore. I just needed to write a first draft. And so, as I said, that was invaluable to me. I think before, as I said, I had always dreamed of writing, but it wasn't really until I saw closely other authors' writing process that I really felt confident enough to start tackling writing on my own. So I have said this before, so if you follow me, you may know this, but American Royals was actually the very first thing that I tried to write when I was working in editorial. I was inspired by the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton and sort of got this idea. And I tried to write a very different version of American Royals. It was, I think, a classic example of trying to write to the market. House of Cards had just come out on Netflix. Everybody was talking about that. I felt like I should be writing this buzzy political thriller, even though I don't really read political thrillers very often. And I tend to read romances and historical fictions. And so I took a stab at American Royals, and it wasn't really right at the time, but it's such a joy to me that I was able to circle back to it years later and look back at the concept and realize, what are the parts of it that are working? How can I tell the type of story that I like to tell and that I like to consume as a reader in this world without trying to make it full of, assassinations and like political intrigue and backstabbing. There's definitely still some backstabbing, but it's not the same as the super dark, gritty version that it was.
Yeah, that was kind of leads into my next question about, where the idea for American Royals came from. So you said the wedding of William and Kate. Are there any other influences that come from real royals, living or dead?
So many. I have, as I said, I read a ton of historical fiction. I grew up reading anything about the Tudors, obviously all the Philippa Gregory books. I love Margaret George, anything about Versailles. And so I had always thought that I was going to write some kind of historical book, particularly about royalty. As you read in my intro, I wrote my senior thesis in undergraduate it was very specific. It was on the marketplace for stories about royalty in America. And in particularly, I was tracking some sales data and finding that a lot of these books in that genre, especially like all the Tudor books, tend to perform better in the United States than they do in the UK and in Europe. And so my personal thesis is that we are more intrigued by the idea of royalty than people who actually have a monarch of their country, because it's this very romanticized, fun sort of fairy tale thing to us. Whereas I think there are plenty of British people, for instance, who have mixed feelings about the monarchy because they pay a lot of taxes that goes to the upkeep of the monarchs, and we don't have to pay any taxes, so we just get to look at them and admire their fashion and like daydream about riding in carriages. And so I had been thinking in this space for a long time and sort of circling this kind of idea, not knowing exactly what I wanted to write, but knowing that I wanted to write a story at a royal court with princesses and princes and sort of everything that comes along with that, which is forbidden love and this sense of duty, the idea that you are fated to do something. We actually used to talk about this a lot at my old job in editorial. We used to joke that stakes are really high. It's really hard to make a book feel high stakes anymore in a contemporary setting. And obviously there are plenty of ways that authors get around that and make it feel very high stakes. But what I mean by that is, if you're reading something like Romeo and Juliet, the stakes are death and like people are literally dying all around. And when you read most contemporary YA novels don't, unless they're like post-apocalyptic, don't have the characters dying all over the place. So it's hard to kind of capture those ideas of like everything is dramatic. And again, this idea of fate that, I'm destined to become something. There's just not a lot of fate left in the modern world, which is obviously a good thing. Like we want everyone to get to grow up and be who they want to be and decide how their own life will play out. But the royalty is sort of the last place that we get to kind of play with those ideas as a storyteller. And so anyway, I kind of realized after the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton, I was in New York seeing how excited everybody in Manhattan was about this wedding and thinking it's so interesting that we as Americans have completely bought into this when, they're not our royal family. And like, we don't even have a royal family, which led me to how would we treat royals if we did have them, which sort of led me into American royals. And then the light bulb moment was obviously realizing that I could do everything that I love about historical novels, but do them in the modern age. So you still get all of the big ball gowns. And like I said, Forbidden Love is so fun and all of that type of thing. But, the characters have iPhones and are modern characters.
Yeah, everything that you said, that all makes a lot of sense. I think that we're seeing, the whole castle envy thing, I think we're seeing that a little bit, play out now as, with the British royal family, seeing everything that's unfolding. The American attitude versus the English attitude is very, very different. And I think in a lot of ways. But you also said earlier, we were talking about influences for the book, that you worked on the Pretty Little Liars series and Gossip Girl. Are those influences as well?
Oh, of course. I grew up on Gossip Girl, the TV show. Like I had just started college when it came out. And I remember all of us watching it around like a tiny dorm room TV and thinking like, there's never been TV like this. And obviously, there had been teen soap operas forever, but like it felt new. It felt like something different. And there are so many homages to Gossip Girl in the books. I feel like I do them subconsciously, but the moment that I always get called out for by the readers is I don't want to spoil anything in book one for people who haven't read it, but at the end of book one, two characters have a very steamy moment in a limo and everyone's like, that's Chuck and Blair, that's Chuck and Blair. And I'm like, yeah, that Chuck and Blair romanticized the limo sexy time for me. So yeah, there are specific things like that. But to your point, I think both of those authors, in particular, Sarah Shepard, because I spent so many years working with her directly, it taught me so much. She is such a master of plotting, and I don't know anybody who writes thrillers like she does. She can just crank them out. I'm very lucky I don't have to do thrillers. I think they're quite hard, but it was, all of her books are multi-POV, and it was really fun to sort of watch how she structures them. My books, for anyone who's not familiar, are also multi-POV, meaning there are 4 young women in American royals who take turns sort of narrating the story. And it's in third person, so they're not talking directly to you, but it's very much in like a close third person in their voice. And so I think a lot of the fun of the story comes in the characters and the way that they play off of each other. And then in particular, getting to see some kind of interaction from 2 points of view. So a lot of that, I studied English in college, but there's only so much about writing that you learn from a traditional English class. It's a lot about sentence structure and how to argue a paper, but not really until I was closely reading and watching other authors build books from the ground up did I feel like I learned on the job about, how do you handle pacing? How do you handle character shifts? And so there are still moments when I write a scene and then I think about it and I'm like, what would Sarah Shepard have done here? Or like, because she used to always say like the person who narrates needs to be the person who has the biggest value change in the scene. And so there will be times, for instance, when I have Samantha tell Beatrice, for instance, some really shocking news. And I wrote that from Sam's POV because it felt instinctively in the moment like this is a Sam moment. She's driving it. But then I realized, Beatrice is the one who learns the news. Beatrice is the one who has the big change. Like I have to go back and redo it from Beatrice's point of view. You always want to see the character for whom the scene is the most meaningful. So there are things like that I sort of learned on the job that I still carry with me all the time.
Definitely. I can't remember what author I watched an interview of or something, but it was that way kind of in romance that like they said that the person is kind of a similar method when you're writing like a romance. It was like the person who has the secret is the or the one that's like holding back their feelings or something, they're the one that is, that sort of thing, like the one that has the is going to be more surprised by it is the one that you write for the POV of, and that definitely makes sense. As
romances are so hard. I don't know how people do dual POV romances. There are so many authors who do them masterfully. As you've seen in my books are usually only narrated by the women, and I don't have like you only get 2 of the 3 corners of the love triangle is what I'm trying to say. So I think it will be really hard. People are always asking me, can Jeff narrate, or like, can Connor narrate? And I think the second that they narrate, the story kind of deflates, because half the fun of the story from the reader's perspective is being along with the young women and not knowing exactly what's going through the guys' heads. Like that's what we all lived through as a teenage. That's the teenage experience. And so, but again, exactly as you said, like there are so many authors who do it so well in a romance, and you're seeing both sides of the romance. I think the key difference is that in those books, you go into the book knowing there's a happily ever after. You go into it knowing like these 2 characters are going to end up together, and the joy of reading it is just being along for the ride and watching how they're going to overcome their obstacles. Whereas, my books are much more like Gossip Girl, as we talked about, much more of a big multi-character soap opera-esque dramatic story with family relationships and romantic relationships and friendships. And so I think, there's no guarantee that no couple is safe. There's no guarantee that anybody will end up together. I actually have changed Endgame for a couple of different people from where I thought, like when I went into the series. And so yeah, I think that's probably part of why I struggle with like showing too many of the POVs, is because I think the romances are inherently different in my books, as in, the reader isn't going into it like knowing who's going to end up together, and as opposed to a traditional romance where you like there's comfort in that. You don't have any comfort in my books. You just it's drama, and you've got to wait and like find out. Sometimes I'm waiting and finding out along with you.
That was actually, you already like covered one of my questions. It was that you write from the perspective of 4 different women throughout these books, and I just kind of the reasoning for that. Is there anything else to that? Like, do you find that it's harder to write from a male perspective? Are you worried about getting that right if you were to write from a male perspective?
I had a male perspective in my first series, The 1,000th Floor, so that it actually had 5 characters, which I thought was so much fun. But I did get a decent amount of negative pushback from the readers, who, especially all the ones who are on audio, which I can totally understand. It would be very hard on audio, that they were like, this book I gave up at chapter 4 or 5 because this book was like too complicated and there are too many people. And so I was like 5, maybe 1 too many. And I'm working on a new project for After American Royals, and it's only 3 narrators. So I'm like losing a narrator with each series, but I did have 1 male POV in that series. So it was like 4 young women and one guy. And he was actually a love interest for, in typical Catherine McGee fashion, for at least 2, I think it was 2 people in the series. I don't think he was ever a love interest for anybody else, but I did definitely have romantic scenes with 2 of my different young women. And I did love writing him. I just, like I said, in American Royals, I think I came up with such fun female characters, and I felt like I had a lot of really sharp, clear story to tell from their perspectives. And I didn't see the need to add any of the guys' voices. Like there was no, like, especially none of the love interests for the main characters. If there was ever like another character who was maybe less of a love interest, but more of a story engine in some other way, I think I would consider it. But I don't know. I never really felt the impulse to. My editor and I keep toying with the idea of like doing some kind of bonus content with the boys, but frankly, it's just like a question of time. I got to keep writing the actual books to keep them on schedule, and I have a 2-year-old, and it's hard to find time to do like the bonus stuff. So it would be really fun to tackle someday, but unfortunately it's like I've got more books under contract that I have to go write first.
Right. Well, speaking of the love interest, we have a couple of questions, and they're both from Kimberly. And Kimberly says, "I love Teddy. Will he have an appearance in the book?" So I assume I'm not.
Yeah, she probably means the 4th book. So the 4th and final American Royals book comes out this fall. End of August, I guess I should say, late summer. I actually just announced the title last week. It is called Rain. It is very fun. I'm so excited about it. And the cover's spectacular. And I don't know when they're going to let me share the cover, but at some point I'll get to share that as well. So yes, Rain was a really, really tricky book for me. I don't like endings. I don't like goodbyes. And I had never written a 4th book before because my first series was a trilogy. And so I was in sort of new territory as a writer. And I felt like, we have 3 books of backstory for these characters. And I really wanted to do all of them justice. So part of the problem with, it's the longest book. It's the longest final manuscript I have ever written. I'm pretty sure. But there's no question that the first draft was the longest I had ever written. It was a monster of a first draft, and my sweet editor helped me. It was too long. We cut a huge chunk of it, but I just had to get a bunch on the page because there was so much that I felt like needed to happen for the characters to sort of wrap up all their stories. And so to answer the question, like pretty much everybody comes back. There are a few very minor characters who don't make an appearance, but for the most part, anybody who appeared over the course of the series comes back at least in one scene. So I wanted to give everybody, I wanted to give the readers a check-in with everybody. So almost everyone you've met over the course of the series pops in at some point, and you find out like what's happened to them and where they are and sort of where they're headed. So that Teddy is for sure in it. Anybody who was a major character at any point is back. So that was also part of the problem, was I was juggling, and there's a major new character, which was a lot of fun. I won't give any more spoilers except to say that there is like, I had plenty of characters on the table, and I don't know, I just got really attached to the idea of this new character. So I have all my main young women narrators, everybody that they've ever had romantic involvements with. And then also this new person. It was just, it's a lot of characters. It's a lot of characters in the book. And yeah, my editor kept trying to make me cut somebody. She was like, "Does this person really need to come back?" And I was like, "Yes, they do. They do." So it's a lot. I hope the readers, remember who everybody is and are patient, but it's a lot of fun. I think I'm very, very happy with where the final product of the book, but it certainly was a journey to get there. This was the trickiest one I think I've ever written.
And that comes out in August, right?
It comes out August 29th.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, I can't wait. All of them I've just like completely devoured. But the other question from Kimberly is, will we be able to buy some Royals merch in the future?
So Kimberly probably follows me on Instagram. I do have some merch that's left over from book launches in the past. That's all produced in very small batches by my publisher, and I'm not legally allowed to sell it, unfortunately. So it's like they make it and give it to me. And I just have a few things left. I have like a couple of mugs. I have, I don't even think I have any of I might have one more tote bag, so I have these small things that are left over, and those were things that they made for the first and second book. And yeah, I wish I could sell it. I don't even have enough quantities to sell. So I just use them for giveaways. I'm allowed to do that. And as I said, the logo and all of that artwork belongs to the publisher. So it's not mine to sell, but there's always, you can always make fan art and reproduce that. That's like not protected by any copyright. And in the meantime, like I said, I will always continue to do giveaways. I just ran another one and a couple weeks ago or last week. And there will be more leading up to the release of book 4. So just stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It would be awesome if you were able to get some merch, but maybe one day they might decide to. But you said that Rain is going to be the final book in the series. Was this always meant to be a series? And if so, how many books did you think were, was there any sort of did you plan out what each book was going to be?
Yes. And it's complicated because it's not just a question of like what I want or even what my editor wants. It's, especially as I know firsthand from having worked at a publisher for 4 years, it's really like publishing is a business. There are a lot of moving pieces. And so I originally sold American Royals book 1, in a 2-book deal. And so that meant going into book 1, I knew that there would at least be a second book. And I wrote book 1. And then as I started book 2, book 1 hadn't even come out yet when I was already starting the manuscript for book 2, because we write so far in advance. And so my editor and I started having conversations about, would there be future books? And she just didn't have the capacity to tell me whether the publisher would make an offer for more books. And so what ended up happening, but she really wanted to do them. I really wanted to do them. And so she asked me if I could sort of, do an ambiguous ending. We used to call it both and it, like do it both ways, give me have my cake and eat it too. Right. So she was like, can you just both and it? Can you write it as if it's the end, but also write it as if there are more, which is easier said than done. So the ending of Majesty, the second book, it's a very funny ending for me. I tend to like really big, loud endings, kind of going back to our earlier talk about like TV. I sort of structure my books like a season of television. I really like the final sequence of events to feel like a really good season finale where a bunch of dramatic stuff happens to everybody. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait till the next season comes out. And Majesty was not like that. It was sort of mostly wrapped up, but a little bit open-ended. Like I closed some doors, but left windows open. And so I wasn't allowed to say this at the time, but it was definitely not what I pictured as endgame for all of the characters. But I was content with it if there were not more books. And I was hopeful that there would be, because obviously if I wrapped it up with a very, very neat and tidy bow at the end, then there definitely wouldn't be more books. So it wasn't, and again, this is just dependent on the business side of things. So it wasn't until after Majesty had come out that my editor was able to come back to me and say, can we have 2 more books? So then I was able to know going into it, okay, the third, I know there's a 4th book. So the 3rd book can end on a major cliffhanger. So the 3rd, as you know, from having read it, does end on a big epic cliffhanger. And then the 4th book is the final book. And I mean, never say never. There might be circumstances in which someday I revisit this series, but this is the end for now. And I don't, I have moved on to something else. And it would take a very specific sequence of events for me to have to get back into it. So right now it's everybody's story is complete. As I said, I'm very happy with where it ends at the end of Rain. But it is very interesting because it's, like I said, it's, these decisions are not always entirely up to me. And so, I finished Majesty and then I had to wait about 10 months before I learned that I could start working on a 3rd book. So I was actually working on something else that I set aside that then became what I'm working on now finally. So I like started it for a little bit and then put it to bed for 2 more years and picked it back up. So it all comes back full circle. But yeah, that's how the book sort of turned out the way they did, with like a couple of them have big cliffhanger endings and then some of them don't.
Yeah, I think when I was reading Majesty, I think at that point it had been announced that it was like only going to be, the 2 books. And so I remember when I heard there's a 3rd book, I was like, what? I thought there was only going to be 2, but I'm very happy that there were more of them. But I just remember thinking like, oh, well, that's a surprise, and
Yeah, it's always really funny to hear from the readers or like see people's video reviews. And there were so many people who were angry at the end of Majesty. I'm like, this isn't where the characters should end. And I like couldn't even disagree. I was thinking, I agree. Yep, you're right. This isn't where they should end. Like, let's hope that it's not, because I really would love to get back in and like finish out the story. So it is, as I said, it's series in particular are such a tricky animal. I remember hearing Sarah Maas talk about this, where her Throne of Glass series was also purchased in chunks. And they're very funny, like book 1 being there was book 1 only. And then there were like, they bought 2 or 3 more, and then they bought the remainder. And you can sort of see, if you like look at the plot of the story, the places where she like wrapped it up, not knowing if there were more. And then it reopens with like more characters and more world and more stuff. And you can definitely see the stepping points where like the book deal affected how big and how grand the story became.
Yeah, I didn't know that until you just said it, but now that you mentioned it, I'm like, that makes sense on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've talked a lot, about your career in the book industry. So if you were interested in getting into the publishing industry and the editing side, what sort of background do you need? Like, what degrees and what experience do you need to get into, a publishing house?
That's a great question. Publishing is such a small business, and it really is very people-based. And so I think it's hard advice to give, but I'd say the best advice is just to it's a lot of English majors. You don't have to be an English major. It's mainly just people who love to read. But living in New York is definitely a plus. There are publishers everywhere. There are a decent number on the West Coast. I mean, there are publishers, and I know there are some local ones in Texas. So you could start there. If you are based in New York, that will certainly make it easier on you, and that you have a great number of options. And unfortunately, I think this is one of those industries very similar to TV, where internships are really the best way in, and they usually are unpaid. And so it's tricky because you are doing labor for free, but I did 2 unpaid internships in college, and I was very lucky that I was able to negotiate with some family a free place to stay while I did those. But it's not easy living in New York. A lot of them are part-time internships. Also, they're like 2 or 3 days a week. So you have other time to work a different job or something. And that's just the best way to get your foot in the door, because almost exclusively when these positions are being hired, it's someone that somebody knows. So they do obviously open up the applications on like the internet, and they will get, they'll open up like an editorial assistant position and they'll get 600 or 800 applicants. But then there will be like 4 emails that go into HR, and they're saying, okay, I know, like Emily interned for me 2 summers ago and she's fabulous. And those people that someone has met in person and seen and can vouch for it just go immediately to the front of the line, and they just usually get hired. And so that's like, once you are in and you meet people, you will find something. It'll just be a matter of time. But it's like I said, it's just such a people business. Everyone is hiring on an as needed basis. It's not working at Google where they hire a class of 200 college grads that all come in together and like have pizza lunches. They hire somebody when somebody gets promoted or somebody quits, and that's it. And so the hiring happens year round. You can't predict it. And as I said, so that I know exactly how I got hired for my first job, which was I met I was lucky. I got an informational interview. That's the other thing is I would say, don't be afraid to cold email people. A lot of people won't reply, but some people will. And there's an editor who's still at HarperCollins named Phoebe A. And I just emailed her and I was like, I really like the books that your group publishes. And I'm about to graduate from college and I would love to come talk to you. And I took the train into New York and she was very cool. She had a 4 p.m. Friday team meeting and like served wine. And so she had my meeting at 3 and then she was like, I guess we must, or I don't know, 3:30 or so. We talked for long enough that her team was coming in and she was like, stay, have a glass of wine with us. We're going to talk about everything. And I did. And then it was probably 5 or 6 months later that a position opened on the internet. I applied for it and I guess I must have I think I reached out to Phoebe and she just straight up emailed the editor that was hiring and was like, I met this girl. She was good. You should hire her. So that's like, that's how it happens. So it's getting in front of people. It's not being afraid to ask. As I said, I sent so many emails to so many people and plenty of them never got a response, but the ones that do, are always nice people. And they love everyone who works in publishing loves reading and loves everyone else who loves reading. And so everyone wants to help young people out. And, it's kind of just being willing to like keep taking meetings and put your face in front of people until someone remembers you and then you get that call back.
Yeah. And, another question I had kind of along those lines is, so your undergraduate degrees are English and French literature, and then you got your MBA. So did that help you in the publishing industry, or did you use your MBA for something else, or how did that come about?
I'm very glad that I got my MBA, but it is, as you can imagine, it's not the most directly relevant to my day-to-day life. I hit an inflection point at my job where I realized that as much as I've talked about editorial and it being great, it wasn't quite for me. I'm really glad that I did it. And as I said, I learned a lot, but I thrive on the really creative stuff. And it's more project managing. And being an editor I think a lot of people think being an editor is just like sitting with a red pen and reading books. It's really not. That's maybe 20 or 30% of the job. It's really just being the project manager for every book that every author of yours does in-house. So it's a ton of meetings. It's like meeting with design to finalize the covers. It's meeting with the production team to talk about the schedule. It's meeting with publicity to go over the author's tour. It's meeting with sales to figure out how many copies are getting into what bookstores. And I kind of didn't realize like how many meetings and phone calls and meetings it was, because I really did think it was like getting paid to sit and read books all day. And that's part of the job. As I said, it's unfortunately most editors are so busy at their job that they do all their reading at night and on the weekends. Like the number of people I saw reading with stacks of papers on the subway. And that's sort of how it turned out. And so I am more of a creative person, and I just started to realize that I didn't want to be, an editor forever. I'm sure it's like true in any job. People say, if you look at your boss or especially your boss's boss and you don't want their job, you're probably in the wrong job. And that was how I started to feel. And so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And like many lost people, I was like, should I go back to school? I saw like a world where I could have gone into some kind of, entertainment based role that having an MBA would have been really helpful for, whether that would be like working at a TV studio or working in some kind of like tech or new media thing. I actually briefly interned at a mobile gaming company, which was really fun. So I wasn't sure. I just knew I like love storytelling and I wanted to stay in some kind of storytelling space. And I thought pivoting out of publishing would be hard without some kind of degree. So I did go to business school. And then it was while I was in business school that I started writing what became The 1,000th Floor. So I started writing my first book in school, and then I ended up selling it like between my first and second years. and then reached a real inflection point, which was, am I a full-time author now? Am I doing this for real? Am I trying to find another job? And ultimately, decided to just keep going and keep writing. And so here I am. But as I said, I think it's never bad to go. School is never bad. Like, it's always good to learn more things. There's so much that I learned at Stanford about just especially the fact that I am my own business. So, working for yourself in any capacity is hard. I think anyone who, has a startup or like is a graphic designer and is a freelancer, it's not that dissimilar what I do, in the sense that, I don't have health insurance. I get paid very erratically, right? Like, I don't get a paycheck every 2 weeks. I get paid 4 or 5 times a year when certain things are triggered. I like had to incorporate as an LLC so that I'm actually a real company and can like make deals and stuff. So there's a lot about that I, even after working in editorial, I hadn't really digested. And it definitely was helpful in that sense. Like, being my own business, I feel a little more empowered to do that after school. And I learned some stuff about marketing, and I think I feel more confident sort of in the meetings with my publisher because of that. But like, do I directly use it on a day-to-day basis? No. But as I said, school, you never know how these things are going to play out. So, and I lived in California for 2 years, and that's never bad. It's beautiful and sunny there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you said. So my boyfriend has an MBA and he works in marketing and everything. And it was a very similar situation of like, well, I don't really love the job I'm in. I should just go back to school, and business sounds fun. So everything, like I've heard all of that sort of thing. And I think that, yeah, everything makes sense that you are your own business. And, I'm glad that that's really helped you in this industry. But the next question I had is kind of what does your daily life as an author look like?
I'm laughing because I'm like, it is so unpredictable. It's like right now, it's like my daily life as a mom equally as much as an author, right? So but oh my gosh, before having a child, it was so much more predictable. And I felt like I could answer this question and be like, well, I like work at my desk while my husband's at work. And it was so different. I think I spent so much more time, I guess, procrastinating, although I wouldn't have called it procrastinating at the time. I wrote much more slowly. So I would do, like, if I was starting a scene, I would go back and I would reread the last scene that character had, so if I was writing a Beatrice chapter, I'd go back and reread, like, what was my last previous Beatrice chapter 3 or 4 chapters ago, remind myself what headspace she's in, like, think about it. If I was hitting a wall, I would like go take a walk or get coffee. And now, so I have an almost 2.5-year-old, and he's in preschool 3 days a week. And then I have someone who helps with him in the afternoon. So I have childcare coverage for a good number of hours. Like, I do his pickup and drop off. So it's much more of like, I write as soon as I come home from drop off if I can. And then I do what I can until I have to go get him or have some other conflict. And yeah, my writing has definitely changed. I don't know. I try to be more efficient. I definitely, like I said, I spend less time procrastinating, I think. And there's less time for like the leisurely walks for sure. But I try to stay on scene. If any, if you've seen me post about this or say it before, I'm a big outliner. So because my books are multi-POV and because there are so many characters and so many plot points, like I'm not capable of writing, by the seat of my pants as some authors do. And so I always start with an outline, and I actually send the outline to my editor before I even start writing, so that she and I can, and it always changes, but she and I can at least talk through, like, she's really good at this and often sees problems that I've missed. And so I can troubleshoot before I get too deep into the story. So that's my usual process is like, I look at my outline and I go, okay, what chapter am I writing today? Or what scene am I on? And that way I have a roadmap. And even if it's not going well, I at least have a direction to go. I'm not just like staring at a blank screen, not sure. Like I said, like I talked to other authors. Kendara Blake is like this, and I was on tour with her, so she's the one that's coming to mind. And she was like, "Yeah, I just stare at the computer, and like I wait till I know what I'm going to write." And I like cannot even fathom working that way. So it just goes to show that everybody's got a different process. I'm like, how do you what do you mean you don't know what the characters are going to do in the scene? Like I always know it just vague directionally, this is a scene. This is a Nina and Jeff dating scene. And like by the end of it, she's more into him than she was at the beginning. And that's all I know. So I never know. Then I have to sit down and decide like, where are they going on their date? Are they reminiscing? Are they being playful with each other? Are they like, what does them like falling in love look like? I don't have a detailed outline, but again, I wouldn't know how to sit down and just be like, what do I feel like writing? So that helps a lot, just that I like have a plan. And even if I'm a little frazzled or don't know exactly, don't know if I'm in the right headspace, at least I have a direction to go and I'm not just totally free falling.
So kind of along those lines, so with, you've basically created this whole kind of government, and, so how do you like, do you have like a list of like, these are all of the like different titles that people would have, or do you have any sort of like notes on the alternate history that you've created or anything like that?
I do. I have the titles are very consistent with the British aristocracy for the most part. I made a few tweaks to try to really emphasize Sam's unique position within the family. So I had some people have noticed this and like been bothered by it, but that Royal Highness is reserved just for the heir and everybody else is their highness, which is obviously not how it is in the real British royal family. But I was just trying to sort of really alienate her in book one, where like her sister is a royal highness and she's not. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, yeah, the alternate history, I have a timeline. I did that from the very beginning. So there's consistency within the books that, I'm if I'm writing like this happened in the 19th century and so was king, I can look back. And so I have made up dates. I have a lot of alternate history that never really got used, but it's all there sort of in my mind. And I try to make it come out in small places and it usually ends up getting cut, but there are little tidbits that they get to appear, which is always fun. As I said, I'm a huge history nerd. So, the concept of the book is obviously that, America, instead of us becoming a democratic republic, like we became a monarchy with George Washington as our first king. So playing that forward, I like to imagine a world where none of the later revolutions happened. Like the French Revolution didn't happen. The Russian Revolution didn't happen. The Spanish American colonies never. And so it's sort of, it's a tricky line to walk, obviously, because no one would want to live in a modern world that was politically stuck in the 18th century. But you want the kings and queens to be characters. And so I've tried to really modernize it. So as I said, I have a lot of alternate history that just never makes it into the books that sort of explains that. For instance, the Russian royal family, I find, like the Romanovs, I find endlessly fascinating. And in particular, the final Tsarina of Russia, Alexandra, who was a princess from Hesse in Germany, was, I think, not really the right person to be in Russia in that time. She was unfortunately pretty reactionary and like ended up pulling her husband down a path that I think he was, before being married to her, like poised on a precipice and could have sort of leaned one way or the other, and like could have, if things had gone differently, taken Russia basically the direction that England went, where the monarchy became more of a constitutional symbolic monarchy, like the Duma, which was the voting, the legislature, became more powerful. And instead of going that way, he became this like absolutist, let's send out the guards and just execute people kind of guy. And so in my alternate history, I have like, instead of marrying Alexandra, he married an American princess who's like modernized his thinking, and like Russia became this, great constitutional monarchy where everybody's happy and the serfs are free and like all that good stuff. So anyway, yeah, not how things played out. I did have at some point like a whole tangent about this, and my editor was like, I'm sorry, you can just like, we don't need to go into the Russian Revolution here today. But yeah, so there are all these like funny side notes that are just me and myself thinking about like, how can I make the history play out in a way that like lends to a very happy modern world where we still have like some tiaras and some queens. So
yeah, that's awesome. So what's your favorite era in American history?
Oh, I mean, I would love to write American Royals Revolution, the historical one where, the characters are living. I think that would be so fun, but no plans to do that at any time soon. I don't know. I think there's a lot of like fun story pieces at sort of the end of the 19th century, like the late Victorian era in America being like the Gilded Age. That there's a lot of fun stuff to do there. Clearly, I romanticize any period that like has big characters and sort of big personalities. So
yeah. Well, so my other question is, if you were to give any advice to a young writer, what advice would you give?
Well, for a young writer, and I always say this in high schools, I'm like, just please go focus on being young. I'm so in awe. There's so many teenagers now who are like, I've written a book and I want to get it published. And that's amazing. But also go enjoy being a teenager. You have the whole rest of your life to publish books, I promise you. And you only get to be a teenager once, and then you're old and you wish you were still a teenager sometimes. So I'm like, go live all the things. You can't write things till you've lived them. That's really true. So go live and have fun and like have friends and fall in love and take risks and all of that. But then also I would say, if for people who really are trying to write, it sounds so obvious, but just read all the time and read widely. It's very easy. And I fall into this trap too, to read the things that we love to read and the things that give us comfort. So like for me, that's just reading, romances and historical fiction over and over and over. But I do try to push myself when I can outside of my comfort zone. I also read a lot of fantasy, but I'll try to push myself to read like a really gritty sci-fi that kind of scares me, or horror terrifies me, but every now and then I'll read a horror, or even like a dense nonfiction, which you have to find the right one, but I try to push myself outside of my usual genres, because if you don't do that, your writing starts to get a little stale over time. It just starts to sort of sound only like the things you read. And I think it's really important for your writing to like sound different. Poetry is also a really good one. I think that poetry can sometimes like shake you out of a weird rut if you're struggling with a scene. I don't know how, but it's just like a different cadence. It's sort of exists in its own space. So I would say read really widely and then just keep writing. Like writing is one of those things that, you have to just kind of buckle down and do it. So many aspiring writers suffer from what I always think of as like act one paralysis, where act one of a book is usually the easiest to write because it's all set up. It's all like meeting the characters. It's all, setting up the world. And so I took me a long time to find them, but I like tried to write a couple of books in middle school. And I was really young, but every single one of them ended at the end of act one. I like set up the characters. They had magic always, and they were about to go on a quest. And then like, that was all I could do. Like I never sent them on the quest. And I think it's really, really easy to write act one and then freak out that it's not good enough and then go edit act one. And I know so many people who are like, have written and edited act one a dozen times and never gotten past. And I always say, just push through, write the whole rest of the book. Right. And I think of books in a traditional sort of 3-act structure. So I like write act 2, write act 3, get the whole thing down. You will probably hate a lot of it, but then you have a book to edit, and it's so much easier to edit a book than to edit ideas that are really, not formed. So that's like, sounds again, so self-evident, but like actually like write and finish your book is actually just the best piece of advice I can give. Don't fall into the trap of like trying to make it perfect. Just keep going and keep going.
Yeah, I understand that. I hear that a lot, especially like during like National Novel Writing Month is like people like it's really easy in the beginning and then towards like halfway through the month people fall off and so that makes a lot of sense. Well, my last question for you is we've talked about rain and everything, but is there anything else that you're working on or what I know that I'm sure that there are things you're working on you can't tell us about yet, but is there anything else down the pipeline?
Yes, I hinted at it a couple times. I'm not sure how much I can say about it yet because it hasn't been announced, but I did finally go back and like resurrect that concept that I had been writing on, that I'm working on briefly between books 2 and 3 of American Royals. It's really, really fun. It is a 2-book deal and it's with my same editor and I'm in the very early stages of it, but and as I said, it's only 3 narrators. So it's slightly easier to juggle even than American Royals was. It's more of the same. If you like American Royals, it's like all of the things that you love. It's drama and ball gowns and sexy princes and backstab. I feel like I can say that it's royal, but I don't know what else I can say. So it's really fun. And I can't wait for everyone to get to read it. And that, I mean, I've not even written a first draft, but that will come out in 2024. I literally just had to do math. I was like, what year is it and what will next year be? Yeah. So it'll come out in fall 2024.
Awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to it and I will definitely put it when we know more information, I will put it on my to read pile.
Please.
Well, thank you, ladies. That was a fantastic panel and it was a really interesting discussion. So thank you very much. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Emily, for participating today. I appreciate your time and your attention. Audience, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed yourself and please don't forget to vote for your favorite Rosewater title on this year's list. I want to remind you that voting is always online. And it's at rosiebookaward.com. That's ROSIE bookaward.com. Today is only one of many author panels that we've scheduled for this school year, highlighting the books and the authors on the Elliott Rosewater, Indiana High School book list. The next panel will be in March on the 1st, and it will highlight the author Lacan Zia Kemp and her Rosewater title, Somewhere Between Bitter and Sweet. So we're sort of continuing the romance thread into the month of March for our next title. So educators, please don't forget that you can access today's session, Librarians 2, on the YouTube site, and you can then watch it with your classes or with patrons and groups at your leisure for whatever time is convenient for you. That's all for today, everyone. Please be safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye, everyone.